What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham G. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network and on Peacock, and today we're talking the latest episode of Broken Skull Sessions with Steve Austin, featuring guest Seth Rollins for September 26, 2021. This was announced about a week ago. They've kind of made the Broken Skull Sessions a monthly staple on Peacock at a time where we're really not getting any original content at all. We have still yet to get the most recent episode of Icons with Lex Luger. That was supposed to air 2.5 months ago. And the excuse was, well, we were waiting for a bigger lead-in. Well, it's been 2.5 fucking months. If we don't have a bigger lead-in for Icons than that, than SummerSlam or some of the other pay-per-views they've been doing, then I don't know what to tell you. We haven't gotten that. We never got the Untold on the Nexus. So they really haven't done a lot of original content on Peacock/the network in a very long time. They did do the 224s that I broke down weeks later here on the channel, but they did those over SummerSlam weekend. That's about it. They did the 9/11 Never Forget documentary, which was really well done. That was more so on their YouTube channel than it was Peacock. But that's about it. So I enjoy the monthly Broken Skull Session shows. They're always great. I love the Bobby Lashley one that went up right before SummerSlam last month. That was great. And I was looking forward to this one. I'm a big Rollins fan, so I was looking forward to it. But a lot of the modern, podcasts or the Broken Skull Sessions they do with the, when I say modern, I mean with like the current WWE superstars, they're not exactly newsworthy because they can't speak on certain parts of their career. They speak on a lot of parts of their career, but they're only coming from a certain, standpoint because they still work for the company. A lot of these people are relatively new that they've had on the show. Like they had Banks and Bayley, who were great, but how much story can you really tell over the last 5 years? They've been on the main roster for 5 years. Rollins has been on for not even a decade, but still, he has more stories to share. I feel like his story hasn't really been beaten down as much as other people's has. Like Bayley and Banks, we've heard their story a million times. Drew was on here back in December, and I feel like we've heard his story a million times too. So Rollins was a fresh face. Not that he doesn't do podcasts. He does a lot of interviews. I've talked to him twice myself. But I feel like we don't really get to hear him in this type of environment a whole lot. And I thought he was awesome. And Rollins is a guy that is known for towing the company line. I mean, let's not go, let's never forget back in the summer of 2019, 2 years ago. Lest we forget, 2 years ago, Rollins really got himself in hot water with wrestling fans when he was boasting about, WWE is the greatest wrestling company on earth. Oh, we're the best. And he'll still do that from time to time. The thing with Rollins, though, is that why would you expect him to say anything different? He's the flag bearer for WWE. He was the world champion at that point. What the fuck do you expect him to say? That AEW is better than WWE? No shit. Like, people really got all hot and bothered, and there were some other dumb things he said that kind of turned fans against him at that point. But I bring all this up because he really is not like that at all in this podcast. He obviously isn't playing a character. He's just Seth frickin' Rollins. And he was very honest, brutally honest at certain points, blunt, straight to the point. And he had a lot of great stories to share. He and Austin had a great chemistry. And he shared a lot of stories that I've never heard before. Shared a lot of things that I don't think I've ever known about up until this podcast. So I thought it was really, really well done. I thought it was a really great watch. And it's close to 2 hours, so it is a big investment of your time if you don't have 2 hours to spare. But I do implore you to check it out at some point. It's well worth sitting down and checking out because it's a great watch. So they open up the podcast, and here's all my notes here. There's going to be a lot to discuss, so bear with me. I might have to kind of speed through some parts of it. But Rollins talks about how life is going great for him right now. He has no complaints. They talk about Steve living out in the middle of nowhere and how he likes living in the middle of nowhere because they bring up how Rollins was like, do you have anyone bothering you out here? Like, what brought you out here? Blah, blah, blah. So to open the podcast, which was cool, to open this episode, they discussed Seth being a father. And he became a father back in, December, when he and Becky had their daughter. So he's been a father for close to a year now. He never honestly envisioned himself, apparently, being a parent one day. And he doesn't know if that's because he was always self-centered, and obviously a part of you has to be self-centered if you're in the wrestling business, but he never really thought he would ever want kids, but he loves being a dad, and now he's smiling. He finds himself smiling on a regular basis, which is cool. He and Becky, according to what he said here, wanted kids. They knew they wanted kids at one point, but didn't know when they could find the time. Because Rollins is at the top of his game, Becky's at the top of her game. They're killing it right now. They're the featured faces on, their respective shows and whatnot. So they just didn't know at what point, hey, can we kind of slow down and have kids? They did say, though, he does mention here, the pandemic gave them an opening to do so, and it was a planned pregnancy. I don't think he was lying when he said that, because he immediately turned to the camera and said, sorry, Vince, I took your top star away from you, but it was a planned pregnancy, which I thought was really funny. They wanted to get married about a year ago, he said. He actually proposed to her 2 years ago in Hawaii, and they got married there as well. They got married, I think, earlier this year, right? Or a couple of months ago. I don't remember exactly when it was, but he said it was in Hawaii. That was where he proposed to her, so that's why they wanted it there. The travel restrictions eased enough where they can make it happen, fly some people over there to enjoy it with them. Had a quick wedding, and that was it. So he actually did the proposal, he said, on a Maui beach. Really, really romantic. He kind of recaps the whole story. Didn't have the ring up until like that point, I think he said. He tells the whole story about it. He recaps it all. And the only other person on that beach when he proposed to her was, funnily enough, a professional photographer. So after he proposed to her, she said, hey, do you mind if I take your picture? And he's like, absolutely. And that's the picture I think he ended up posting on Instagram. So that's pretty fucking cool. And then Steve mentions that he actually did his proposal to his wife, his current wife, at a deer stand in South Texas. So everyone's different. Everyone has their own story. He talks about that adrenaline from fans, being back on the road, being back in front of people, and how great it is to feed off the fans. He honestly thought in coming back to the road, he would be more booed. He is currently a heel, but he's right. He talks about how since being back on the road, the fans have kind of been split towards him at the pay-per-views and on the SmackDowns and whatnot. It's been a pretty split reaction for the most part, which is surprising. People love Rollins, but they also love to hate Rollins as well. And this was great. So Steve then brings up, he points out that both he and Seth share something in common. Not only have they won every championship imaginable, but also they have both won the award, the prestigious award for worst match of the year, as voted on by the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Awards, aka Dave Meltzer. Rollins is like, well, who makes the award? It's like he's joking. He knows it's a Meltzer thing, and they don't shit on Meltzer. But yeah, it's funny. They actually mention the Wrestling Observer Newsletter, because you can't bring up worst match of the year and then not cite where the awards, come from. I don't think they mention Meltzer, but they do mention the Observer, which is funny. So he talks honestly. He shoots on the Hell in a Cell match with The Fiend, which is what won the award, obviously. Hell in a Cell 2019, he and The Fiend, Universal Championship, one of the worst matches I have ever seen as a fan. And I think a lot of people would agree. One of the angriest periods I've ever seen fans. I think a lot of people would agree with that as well. He admits that his vision for that match was way different. Both he and Bray was way different than what WWE wanted, specifically Vince. And the reaction they got from that match, online, but specifically in the arena that night, was a tough pill for Seth to swallow. He does look at the positive and says, listen, it was the catalyst for what happened later that year, me turning heel, becoming the Messiah, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of good did come from it. But coming through the curtain, he said he was ready to strangle Vince McMahon. He came through that curtain, he was fucking pissed. And the person who held him back was Tyson Kidd, a.k.a. TJ Wilson, which is just a great story. He didn't get his hands on Vince. Not that he probably would have actually strangled him. He probably would have gotten in his face, because Seth kind of seems like an intense guy and very passionate, very aggressive when he wants to be. So instead of getting in Vince's face, he simply stared him down. They locked eyes. They stared at each other for a moment. Vince stared at him right back and then walked out. So Seth talked with Heyman instead. And, about what happened and whatever, because Heyman at that point was the Raw executive director, the lead creative writer, whatever. He did talk to Vince about it, but the next day. He was glad he talked about it with him the next day, because he was a lot calmer at that point, and he was coming from a different perspective, a different point of view. He was still pretty pissed about it, though, and he's like, listen, we can't let this happen again, because that was garbage. I think Seth, Bray, everyone in their fucking right mind knew going into that match that what they did was going to be dumb. Up until they even did it, it was fucking stupid. You pitch it, it's dumb. It's not one of those things where you pitch it and it actually ends up a lot better than how it sounds on paper. No, it was every bit as dumb, if not stupider. That's how bad that finish was. And that pay-per-view turned a lot of people off from the product. I can tell you that for a fact. It was awful. But hey, he said it wouldn't be the worst match if it went their way, so it kind of worked out, I guess. Hey, cheers to that, I guess he says. So he talks about getting into wrestling, growing up in Iowa. It is. I was going to say Ohio, but no, it was Iowa. He always loved wrestling from an early age. He started wrestling on a trampoline. We've heard this story before. He was inspired by Mick Foley showing his background in wrestling on WWE TV, and that he would wrestle on trampolines and wrestle in his backyard. Rollins kind of followed in his footsteps in that respect. He did play a lot of sports when he was younger, so he was really athletic, but they would just try moves out. He wasn't really formally trained early on. He would just try shit out on the trampoline and wrestle with his friends. He learned from, a show or a documentary, the tricks about pro wrestling, like the magic behind pro wrestling. He watched that and then would try that shit out on the trampoline. They would spend hours doing that stuff. And at a certain point, he wanted to go to a Ring of Honor wrestling school that was run by CM Punk at the time. He got there, he may have partook in it, but up until a certain point, it came to a point where he realized he couldn't afford it. So he had already moved away from home to go try out this wrestling school. Either he did it and then ran out of money, or he never had the money to do it in the first place. But he had to live in his car for a while, and he didn't want to feel the shame of going back home and admitting defeat, but he kind of had to. But, he went home ultimately, he got a job, made money, and then started training with Danny Davis, if I'm not mistaken. And it was around that time that he was willing to put the work in, get better, and then eventually he signed with Ring of Honor. He mentions Gabe Sapolsky by name, who was the head booker at the time of Ring of Honor and the current booker for NXT, he mentions. He still should be, I don't know that for a fact, but even with the whole NXT 2.0 shit going on right now, I'm pretty sure he is, but I don't know that for an absolute fact. He wanted to do more of a high-flying style and really got to, kind of tweak that style upon arriving in Ring of Honor and working with various people and all this other stuff. He mentioned he had a match with Jay Briscoe. Jay Briscoe getting a shout-out here on Peacock and the WWE Network. Very cool, on a WWE show. And it was after that trial match that he got offered a contract to come on into Ring of Honor. He immediately got put in a faction with Jimmy Jacobs and all these other people. Forgot the name of it. I'm sure, if you mentioned it, I'm sure I would remember. But he was put in a faction from the get-go. And he talked about kind of taking bits and pieces from certain people he grew up idolizing, like a Punk and a Hayabusa and people like that. Like he learned the Phoenix Splash from Hayabusa and really incorporated that into his in-ring style at a certain point. So he didn't know what a character was back then, didn't really know what made him a character. He would just do cool stuff, and that was it. But he did learn how to kind of hone in on the character stuff from Joey Mercury. So he was friends with Joey Mercury, learned a lot from him, and Joey asked him, hey, have you talked with anyone from WWE? And Seth said no. And at this point, his name was Tyler Black, obviously, but for the sake of clarity, we're calling him Seth Rollins. It was around that time that his contract with Ring of Honor was coming due. This was probably, 2010, I think? I think it was 2009. Or maybe it was 2010. 2009 was when Bryan and Nigel came in. So it was probably closer to 2010 that Seth Rollins was, going to WWE. So he was the Ring of Honor champion at the time. Dave Lagana, who I think was with Ring of Honor, talked with John Laurinaitis about Seth maybe going in, put in a good word for him. While this is going on, he gets a call from Dixie Carter, who wanted him in TNA. TNA really wanted Seth Rollins. They talked to Seth. He actually verbally agreed to a contract with Terry Taylor. And there's a lot of horror stories out there from, about Terry Taylor, a lot of them apparently true. But he was, in the upper management in TNA at the time, and they really wanted him in TNA. And TNA had just snatched up Nigel because WWE didn't clear him and they couldn't hire him, so TNA picked him up, and that was around the time that TNA was doing the whole Hogan Bischoff shit. They underwent that massive reset in early 2010. So I don't know if Rollins would have been a part of that. Obviously when he first went to WWE, he wasn't on TV immediately. Obviously him going to WWE was the best thing that could have happened, but I can only imagine a world where Rollins went to TNA instead. It was probably after the TNA reset, but how much of an actual role he would have had on the show, I don't know. The Bucks were there for a while. They got left by 2011, 2012. So I don't think he really would have lasted that long, to be honest. They already had an AJ Styles. I don't know if Rollins would have really fit in. But anyway, he was ready to take that contract. He was moments away from signing that contract when he called John Laurinaitis one final time, because he had emailed him, he had called him and told him, listen, I'm ready to sign with TNA if you guys don't get back to me. Because Laurinaitis at that point, and even now, not now, but at that point, nowadays is he still part of is he still the head of talent relations today? I know he's in a similar role today. Back then, though, he was kind of managing the hiring process and whatnot. I know he fires people now. I don't know if he hires people. But anyway, so he had finally called Rollins back up right before he was about to go to TNA, and Rollins kind of jobbed out Terry Taylor for a while, letting his messages go to voicemail and whatnot, because he wanted to go to WWE, but hey, this TNA deal was more money than he'd ever seen in his entire life, so he was willing to go there if WWE didn't get back to him. Laurinaitis eventually gave him a call back, said, hey, we would be interested in bringing you in. And he gave him the famous line of, we don't give out jobs here, we give out opportunities. So we'd be willing to bring you into our developmental deal, have you train here with us. He's like, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, sure, absolutely. So Rollins was all in. And it was funny, too, he mentions how Cornette called him. I forgot to mention this part. Cornette plays an important role in this story as well. I guess when Cornette found out, because he was a head official at Ring of Honor, when he found out that TNA wanted Rollins, he went fucking off on him, because Cornette had just left TNA. He did not want Rollins going there. He was happy for Rollins going to WWE, and he was, as was Ring of Honor, they were all happy that he ended up in WWE. They did not want him in TNA, because Cornette knew all the horror stories of the behind-the-scenes shit. They thought it would be a bad idea if he went there. So he was very happy that he didn't, but he actually had Rollins send him the contract, the TNA contract, and kind of advised him, hey, don't fucking go there. You'd be killing your own career. So he was grateful to work under Cornette. He actually said that he had some heat, or does have some heat with Cornette now, after what he said about Becky. I don't know what that would have been. But he does respect Cornette for all the years he's spent in the business. So he arrives at FCW. He calls it a shit warehouse. And he met Tom Pritchard. Dr. Tom Pritchard had a lot of praise for him here on the show. I guess no one told Dr. Tom that Rollins was showing up, so he called up Johnny, and Johnny didn't tell Dr. Tom that Seth was showing up to FCW, so kind of, fucking yelled at him on the phone for that. But yeah, so he progressed from there. He was in developmental for a while, including NXT when they rebranded it into what it is, or was up until NXT 2.0. And they rewatch him winning the NXT Championship from Jinder Mahal on a, July or August episode of NXT TV. And with the blonde hair, he said he wanted to stand out because Steve made a comment about that. And they rewatched the match, and winning, becoming the inaugural NXT champion. And Dusty Rhodes was there. He shares a couple of emotional Dusty stories, saying that Dusty always told him to just be himself. And then he shares a story about almost getting fired from NXT. And I know he's told this story before, but it's a great story. Almost getting fired by Triple H. So one of the head people at NXT, probably still now, definitely back then, was Terry Taylor. Obviously, we just got done talking about him, as he worked in TNA a few years before this. He made the jump from Impact to WWE, specifically NXT, and he worked very closely with Triple H. They were very close from their WCW days. So he had always rubbed Taylor the wrong way. He kind of got in his face and vice versa. And he told Taylor, hey, don't get in my face and don't tell me what I'm doing is wrong, blah, blah, blah. You can't fucking do that when you're a rookie in this company. So Terry obviously told Triple H about this, and Triple H told him, hey, listen, dude, I don't see you as special. He told this to Seth. He said, listen, we don't see you as special. If you don't want to do things our way, you can go do things your way in Ring of Honor. Go back to Ring of Honor. That's not how we act here. So Triple H was ready to fire him. Rollins eventually kind of got back on the same page. Mercury gave him some great advice and told him, listen, do what they want you to do, but you also got to show them how you do things as well, slowly but surely. And it did work out that way. He told Triple H right off the bat, listen, I want to be your first NXT champion. And he was one slip up away from being fired, he said. And then he did become NXT champion. He said the matches that he and Rollins and Ambrose had in FCW really paved the way for what NXT became, and hiring all the indie guys, because they weren't hiring a whole bunch of indie guys prior to that point. They hired Bryan, but other than that, and they almost got Nigel, but they really weren't hiring a lot of indie guys. So the Rollins and Ambrose matches showed them, hey, there might be some money here in kind of featuring that indie style of wrestling on a WWE stage. So they talk about the Shield, also involving Roman Reigns, and the three of them initially were not close outside of the ring. They really weren't close friends, didn't have a lot in common. But they did debut at Survivor Series 2012 to help out Punk, help him retain the WWE Championship against John Cena and Ryback in a triple threat match. They rewatched said debut here on the show with Steve. Steve and Seth rewatching it back. And he said they got such a good reaction in their first few weeks together that the idea for them to be the heavies and the bodyguards for Punk was abandoned almost immediately. So they were supposed to be Punk's guys, and, Roman has talked about this, Ambrose has talked about this. They moved away from that almost immediately. And Mercury, once again, coming in handy here, told him he wasn't working there at the time, I don't think. Or no, he was. Mercury was working there because with J&J Security and whatnot. What am I talking about? But yeah, Mercury said, he's like, listen, guys, you got to travel together. You got to eat, sleep, breathe, wrestling together. You really got to get on the same page. And that's what brought Roman, Dean, and Seth together as friends outside of the ring and really creating this awesome chemistry on screen as well. Seth shares this story about him and Ambrose going after Orton in the ring, and Orton came through the fucking gorilla all pissed because he thought he and Ambrose were shooting on him. Triple H is like, listen, don't worry about him. He'll get over it. Seth talks about the healthy competition that was among the three of them at the time, and they kind of realized halfway through their run as the show that Reigns was the one they intended, that WWE wanted to be the breakout star of the three of them, that WWE really wanted to be the breakout star of the Shield. So they actually incorporated Romans into their matches, and if you're wondering what a Romant is, according to Seth, it's a Roman moment. That's why they call it a Romant. It means that they would incorporate moments where it was all about Roman Reigns, or he was like the central focus of their match. And I remember that happening quite a bit in late 2013, early 2014. I very much remember that. So they talk about that, and and how stupid it was to initially break them up a lot earlier than they did. So they do rewatch the split here, and Rollins mentioned how they found out only hours beforehand that they'd be splitting up. But they were actually originally intended to break up like months earlier in December, January. Which would make sense because remember, they lost, I think. Didn't they lose a 3-on-1 handicap match to CM Punk at TLC? And then Ambrose lost to Punk, Rollins lost to Punk, but Reigns beat Punk, which meant that Roman was going to be the big breakout star. They were teasing something between Ambrose and Roman for a while there. So they were going to break up in time for WrestleMania. And not even a triple threat match. Rollins says here, and everyone has different stories, but Rollins says here that the initial plan for Mania was Roman versus Ambrose at WrestleMania 30. Not a triple threat. Probably for the United States Championship. That's why they kept the belt on Ambrose for so fucking long. Even well after Roman and Seth dropped the tag titles. That's probably why he was still champion. And he didn't defend it for months on end, so, that would make sense. But, yeah, so that was the initial plan. He thought maybe I would have been the special guest referee, who knows. But it was during that point that they became babyfaces, that they were so cool as a trio, that initially or eventually enamored them, or not enamored, but kind of endeared them to the audience. So there was no more talk of a turn during the Evolution feud. They beat Evolution at, what was it, Payback, Backlash? Or yeah, it was Payback. Beat them again for a second time. Oh, no, the second match was Payback. The first one was Extreme Rules, right? Yeah, the first one was Extreme Rules. The second one was Payback. That's what it was. No talk of a turn, no talk of a split during that point until the night after that second Evolution win. On my birthday, June 2nd, 2014, literally right before the show, they were told, we're breaking you guys up. And that was really when he started to find his footing as a heel, he said. He became a character. And that Money in the Bank moment really stands out to him as one of his favorite moments in his career, along with the initial title win at WrestleMania 31, because he calls that briefcase a meal ticket. That's how you know the company's behind you. And he had a great run after that. They rewatched the WrestleMania 31 Money in the Bank cash-in where he became WWE Champion. Great moment, one of my favorites as a fan. And he calls it the best of all time. And sometimes watching it back all these years later, it feels to him like an out-of-body experience. Because it's hard to envision what was happening at that point, because it was such a crazy moment that all these years later, it doesn't feel like it was actually him in that moment making it happen. They also rewatch him injuring his knee on that house show against Kane in November of 2015, and right after it happened, he really hadn't been hurt a whole lot after that point, so he didn't know the extent of the injury until he got an MRI, and the doctor called him up and said, hey, you tore your ACL, and your MCL, and your meniscus. So Rollins is like, all right, what does that mean? Rollins found out he's going to be out for up to 6 to 9 months. And he was only out for 6. So he really tried hard to get back. He felt pressure, that pressure being relieved initially because he had been champion for so long. But he also felt like he was letting the company down, the fans down, because he was the central focus of the product the entire time while he was champion. He was supposed to get the belt from Mania to whoever he was supposed to drop it to. Probably Roman at Survivor Series, if I had to take a guess. But I don't remember. I don't think it's ever been 100% confirm that was the initial plan, but I'm pretty sure he has said that at some other point that he was supposed to drop the belt at Survivor Series. But yeah, so he really wanted to make it back in time for WrestleMania 32. That was his initial plan, but it was 5 months out. It really would have been cutting it close. And then he's thinking to himself, I can't. And he tried really hard to get back for that. He couldn't. And then by the time he was cleared to compete in late May of 2016, Extreme Rules 2016 comes back, lays out Roman Reigns. Typical WWE, but leading up to his return, there was no direction for what he was going to do when he came back. But he had doubts, too. He doubted how the fans would react to him. He had doubts about how well he can go in the ring. He had doubts about where he would fit into the WWE landscape. And a lot had changed in his absence. They brought in AJ Styles. They brought in Shinsuke Nakamura to NXT. They had Gallows and Anderson on the roster. They had a lot of new talent. People called up from NXT. There was a question of where Rollins would fit in. He didn't know if he would be at the same level that he was before he got hurt. And he thought he would return as a face. I'm very happy that Steve brought up this question, and I don't think Seth has talked about this before, at least not as in-depth as he did here. Steve asks him, do you feel like you should have been brought back as a babyface? Because listen to that reaction that you get. That reaction you receive at Extreme Rules 2016 was so fucking loud. And not even that night, even the next night, people were comparing it to Triple H MSG02. Was it the same thing? No, but it did come close. People really wanted Rollins back, and he got a great reaction. And I'm sure had they run with him as a babyface at that point, they would have absolutely been behind it. I still say 5 years later, it was fucking dumb to not turn him babyface at that point. I know they wanted to wait, I guess, until the Triple H turn happened months later, but still, I really think they missed an opportunity to not do it sooner. And he feels they should have gone in that direction. It would have been a natural progression of his character, and people were ready for it. It's an easy story to tell. It's the belt I never lost. People are behind me. And he says it hurt both of them in the long run to not tell that story. People, he mentioned, were not into Roman at that point as the babyface champion. And they really never would be. I mean, they would for like 5 minutes after he won the championship in December 2015. Other than that, though, people have never really solidly been behind Roman as a babyface champion. At any point. Only now are people behind him and he's a heel. And that's WWE's fault. And that's a whole other story for a different day. But that's why they were cheering AJ to win the belt at Extreme Rules, and they cheered for Rollins because they just really did not like Roman being in that spot at that point. And as a result, Rollins felt like he was in kind of no man's land for a while. He was directionless, lost confidence in himself over time. They even talk about the WrestleMania 33 match facing Triple H at WrestleMania 33, which a match I thoroughly enjoyed, but he even says what we were thinking. That match did not sit all the way right with him. Just because there was a long stretch where they didn't feud. They did that initial hot angle where Triple H turned on him, but that was in August of 2016. Their match didn't happen until fucking April. They didn't heat that feud back up until January. That's a long time. Like, they had all this heat, and there was no follow-up for months. And then Owens was kind of like the scapegoat. They never really booked him properly in Triple H's absence. That hurt Owens. That hurt a lot of people. Raw was not good in late 2016. I love the brand split when they first brought it back, and I still am a proponent of it today. But it wasn't good. It wasn't good for Rollins even after return because he never really had a solid turn. People didn't really know if he was a face or a heel for a while, and again, I completely agree with that. And they went away from the feud, and he still didn't feel comfortable in his own skin even coming out of that WrestleMania 33 match. But he does say that reuniting with Ambrose in the summer of 2017 was his saving grace as a babyface. And I completely agree with that. I completely agree. I love that story. He loved the way the story was told. How like each week it would be something different, culminating in the two finally reuniting right before SummerSlam to then win the tag titles that Sunday at the pay-per-view. He says the reunions, reunions, plural, serve their purpose for the Shield. The group, they weren't going to be together forever. The whole purpose of the group was to create 3 new stars. And that's exactly what the Shield did. And as a result, he calls it the most successful faction of all time. There's not a single Marty, no disrespect to Marty Jannetty, he says. There's not a single Marty in that group. Maybe the 4 Horsemen come close, but even then, because they're all incredible workers, but no one else in that group aside from Flair was on Flair's level. Whereas in the Shield, they're all Ric Flairs. He then gets into, which I absolutely love that he covered, the Intercontinental Championship run that he had in 2018. And he mentioned that the Intercontinental Championship, for a lot of wrestling fans growing up, always held a very special place in his heart. And he was actually the one that pitched to have that run in 2018 as the Intercontinental Champion. He recalls a conversation, and this happens a lot in this episode, where Steve will mention something and then Rollins will kind of, not backtrack, but like backtrack in a good way, where he goes backwards to kind of give complete context and share a story for what set up what happened in the moment that Steve is asking about, if that makes sense. So he goes all the way back to the summer of 2017, right after the Triple H match in Mania, probably right before the Shield stuff. Because you gotta remember, before the Shield stuff happened, before he reunited with Ambrose, and that was when he kind of started to find his footing as a babyface, it really wasn't until 2018 that he was firing at all cylinders as a babyface. It took him a long time to really settle into that role. The Ambrose stuff was great, but he was a tag team guy. Coming out of the Triple H match, he beats Triple H at WrestleMania. They had absolutely no fucking clue what to do with Seth Rollins. They had him briefly feud with Samoa Joe, who I think he actually beat at the Payback pay-per-view. He was then in like a multi-man match to determine the number one contender for the Universal title, and just a completely random 5-way. He didn't win that. I think Joe actually... How much sense does that make? He beat Joe. He was the first one to pin Joe on the main roster, and then Joe becomes the number one contender to the championship of the next pay-per-view. How much fucking sense does that make? And then he was working with Bray in a one-and-done pay-per-view program. He wasn't doing shit at that point. He wasn't doing shit. He was doing nothing as a babyface. So Vince went up to him and asked him, where is the Seth Rollins? Where is that fire? Blah, blah, blah. And Rollins got fucking pissed. He stood up for himself and said, listen, I'm still here. Like, I'm giving it my effort. I'm here on every show. I'm busting my ass. So don't give me that shit. Don't tell me that I'm not busting my ass. I'm not giving it a full, complete, 100% effort, because I am. Every single time I'm out there, you just need to give me an opportunity. And Vince respected that, and he was the one who pitched the Intercontinental Championship match at WrestleMania 34, which Rollins calls one of the best wrestling openings in Mania history, which I agree with. That's a great triple threat between Rollins, Finn Balor, and The Miz. Respect to all three of them, because they all fucking killed it that night. That was a very good show. And that opener was specifically great. But yeah, so they had an amazing opener. Rollins won. And he even told Vince, hey, give me the belt and my work rate will get me over as a babyface. He praises Miz and Balor for their parts, for the parts they played in that match. And he says he was in a really special place with the fans at that time. The one thing I feel like he should have mentioned is that it wasn't just the Mania triple threat match that really kicked off that run for him, like the Monday Night Rollins thing. It was actually a month or two before that gauntlet match on Raw, where the winner, I think the person, whoever won, got like the last spot in the Elimination Chamber that Sunday. Rollins lasted, like before Kofi did it, before other people have done it in recent years. Rollins was the first one to really go the distance and be in there for like an hour and a half. He beat Roman and Cena clean back to back. Then he like ultimately lost like fucking Elias or something. But still, it was like this amazing match. He had this incredible showing, and people were really, really, really behind Seth Rollins. To the point where, before Roman eventually did it at SummerSlam that year, people wanted Seth to be the one to take the championship from Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam, not Roman Reigns. He was really, really over. There was a period where Rollins and Braun were like on just another level of being over with the audience. And he mentioned how, you got to have that you have to have work to have that relationship with Vince, and you can't be that way with him on day one. You got to kind of have to work to have that relationship. And it takes time to earn Brock Lesnar's respect as well. So he goes all the way back to Battleground 2015, coming out of WrestleMania 31, when he cashed in on him, and they kind of went back to it a couple of months later. Brock took time off. Rollins was champion. They went back to the match at Battleground 2015. Rollins had all these ideas for the match. And then they find out the day of that Taker's coming back and attacking Brock at the end to set up their SummerSlam match. So Lesnar felt blindsided by this, and he didn't know that until the day of, a lot like Rollins. And Rollins asked to do all this stuff, and Brock said no. It's a lot like with the Ambrose match, because this one made more sense. Brock said no, because he felt it doesn't even matter what we do in this match. Because if Taker's coming out at the end, let's just work a simple match. It doesn't matter what we do. Let's just tell a simple story. Because when Taker comes out, that's all people are going to remember / talk about. So why have a great match? It doesn't even matter. And Rollins was heartbroken about it, but he gets the bigger picture now. So fast forward to 2019. They were having a fine feud going into WrestleMania 35. And then they find out that they're not main eventing, because Rollins had won the Rumble. But the match that should have main evented WrestleMania, as he admits, was the Becky, Ronda, Charlotte match, specifically Becky and Ronda. Charlotte should not have been in there, but whatever. they find out that match is going on last, as it should have. But it really hurt him because he's in a tough spot relationship-wise, too, because he's dating this girl that's going to be in the main event, but he wants that spot. And, he was really happy for her, but he was disappointed, too, because he had never been on the WrestleMania marquee before. He did cash in the WrestleMania main event at 31, but he wasn't actually on the marquee. He wasn't supposed to be in the match until, the last 3 minutes, until he cashed in. So Lesnar also said he found out that day he didn't want to go on last. He didn't want to go on second to last, rather. They would have gone on last, but he didn't want to go on second to last. Because Lesnar felt it would have hurt the finish of both matches had they done, Rollins winning and then Becky winning. That would have hurt both matches. So Brock's, opinion was to go on first. That was his call, which was a great call because it was a great way to kick off the show. It took some convincing for Vince, obviously. And everyone said, Vince is always right. Well, it wasn't his fucking idea, and these people convinced them of it, and it was their idea, and it was a great idea. So Vince isn't always right. Let's cut it with that bullshit. But anyway, so they made that change like an hour out. They drank beer afterward. He really earned Brock's respect from that. He won him over, which was great. And he said he's a nice guy when he wants to be. Brock Lesnar, that is. He's going, sorry, Brock, for ruining your aura, but that's just what it is, which I thought was great. He said Burn It Down happened because of Vince. I guess he burned down like a building in a commercial for like a video game or something. Vince heard it, and he wanted it in his intro, and they got it, and Seth thought it was stupid, but then it blew up, and it became like iconic and symbolic, and, what's the word? Just kind of went hand in hand with his character, So they rewatched that WrestleMania 35 match, very brief, obviously. Sold great for Rollins' curb stomps. They say Lesnar is very giving when he wants to be, and at SummerSlam that year, they had the match that Seth always wanted. It was a competitive match. Rollins looked great and hit him with all of his offense. It was awesome. And he talked about getting booed and how he felt like shit because that goodwill was going downhill for him at that point. Doesn't specify why it went downhill. I mean, partly it was because of the Becky thing and the stories and the chase and whatnot. And it's difficult to maintain that, that level of being over and whatnot. And he's fortunate to not really be like an underdog. He's got a beautiful wife, he's tall. There's really nothing about him that people want to cheer for, aside from the fact he's a great wrestler and whatnot. So he understands why people would boo him. But what he doesn't mention was that part of the reason why people were booing him too, was because he was saying a lot of dumb shit at that point about Jon Moxley, the company, towing the company line, which a lot of fans do not like. So they did not like that. Even Becky Lynch, apparently, according to Seth here, was not thrilled with the story they were telling that summer when they were paired up on TV. They were already dating in real life, but she wasn't thrilled with how they were portrayed. And it also didn't help with Rollins' run as champion that year. It wasn't really that memorable of a run because they didn't have any great heels lined up for him. He even said that here, which is fucking true. He worked with Baron fucking Corbin for at least 2 or 3 pay-per-views. At least 2 or 3 pay-per-views because they didn't have anyone else. He had that amazing match with AJ Styles, but that was before he turned heel, and they should have gone back to that. The Corbin feud was a fucking waste of time, and then he had to go back to Brock. He had to work with Brock again because there was no one else for him to work with. That's what happened. He worked with Corbin for like 3 pay-per-views. I'm like, do you really have no one else in your fucking show for this guy to work with? My God. Becky recovered from that storyline that they had on TV. Seth did not, he said. And he got booed during his SummerSlam entrance against Brock, and Toronto can be tough on the baby faces nowadays, but he got them back behind him by the end. He called it a very satisfying match and a finish. It was a great match. I will definitely agree with that. And he goes back to the Hell in a Cell thing, and he went backstage with Heyman, and he told him, he's like, hey, if that's what people want, let's give it to him. Let's give him heel Seth Rollins after Hell in a Cell. And they eventually built to it. He became the Messiah. They talk about the pandemic era, and how it was tough to really not have the fans there to feed off of, and they had to do something completely different, which is why he started talking more during his matches, and he focused on the camera a lot like Edge and Randy Orton did. He took the tone of his promos down an octave. He started, talking during his matches and whatnot, like I said. He really upped his game in that respect, and a lot of people didn't like the Messiah shit, which, I understand, but I thought he was doing great character work, so I thought he really made the most of a bad situation, as a lot of those people did. Bayley, Asuka to an extent, among other people. We saw one-dimensional characters on the show and was like, I want to do something different. I want to stand out and be the character guy, like the Ric Flair larger-than-life guy that we don't have on the show right now. He credits Becky for the suits. That's what kind of created the current character that Rollins now has on WWE TV. He wanted to go to the other end of the spectrum. He wanted to do something like if Rollins completely lost his mind how would he dress, how would he how would he, dress, how would he act and whatnot. Let's do that. And it's nice to know for him that what he's doing is working based off the reactions he's been getting in front of these fans. And you have to become the character. When you become the character and aren't trying to put on a character, that's when it really clicks, he says. To end the thing, they talk about his wrestling school, Black and Brave Wrestling School, and how he didn't think there were many reputable wrestling schools back in 2014. He had a tag team partner at the time, Something Brave. I think the guy's name started with an M, I forget, but his last name was Brave. Tyler Black's name was Tyler Black. Rollins' name at the time was Tyler Black, so it was the Black and Brave Academy. He opened a coffee shop right up next to it. He's learning stuff all the time, teaching in his own classes at the school, which is cool. He says he's checked off a lot of boxes as far as his goals, but he still wants the main event at WrestleMania, and it's not going to really feel fully satisfying for him when he's done until he gets his name on the marquee of a WrestleMania. And he says that his priorities are starting to shift as a dad now. He has a few years left on his contract, he reveals. Don't know if that was public knowledge, but he says he's got a couple of years left on his deal. By the time it's up, his daughter is going to be 3 or 4 years old, so that probably puts his contract at about 2023, maybe early 24, I would say. Probably around 2024. She'll be starting school around then. He would like to be there for that. So he doesn't really know if he's going to continue wrestling beyond that. So I thought that was really interesting that he didn't say, oh, yeah, I'm going to wrestle till I'm 55. Like, he's going to be around 40 by then. So it's pretty young considering Jericho's still going to 50-something. So 50 years old, which is impressive. But still, I guess Rollins wants to just be home and be a dad, which is really commendable. Really, a lot of respect for that. And Steve says, I look forward to seeing your name, Seth, on a WrestleMania marquee one day. So that ended the interview. Great stuff here. I cannot stress enough how much I enjoyed this. A lot more than I thought I would. I've always liked Rollins, but again, he's always been a big company guy, which I get. He's one of the faces of the company and whatnot, but he really was honest about a lot of shit here. I don't know if Rollins was just in a mood with how much he really wanted to tell Steve, or if Steve's just an amazing interviewer. But either way, this was awesome. I fucking loved it. The 2 hours flew by. Cannot recommend it enough right now on Peacock and the WWE Network. Broken Skull Sessions with Seth Rollins. Be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content, including SmackDown audio reviews, Raw Talk reviews, Talking Smack reviews, Q&A videos every Wednesday, podcast excerpts every Thursdays, interviews with MLW stars, WWE stars, Ring of Honor, Impact, AEW stars, and much, much more. And just have a great week, guys. Thank you for supporting the channel. I appreciate it. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.